At what point should you give up on an addict? And I don't think there's any right answer to this. Obviously, the relationship you have with the addict is going to determine some of your decision making when it comes to that. But you can't enable addicts. And that's got to be the hardest part. You know, I've never been on the other side. Well, I guess I have. I have had some friends that have had some drinking problems who I just had to cut out of my life. Even when I was an addict myself, I was like, I just can't be around this. I can't enable this. And that's the hardest part, right? You know, if it's your son or your daughter, your husband or your wife who's the addict, it's tough. But you can't just allow them to walk all over you. You know, addicts are very manipulative. Addicts can very abusive, both physical, some can be physical, a lot of times, you know, with drinking problems, and emotionally, you know. And at a certain point, you need to realize that you're not helping them by what's the word I'm looking for? You know, just condoning the behavior. And it definitely reaches a point to where you need to just throw your hands in the air and walk away. You know, I was talking to a lady through DMs. She had reached out to me saying that her husband is he's got a lot of like mental health issues. You know, he said he was diagnosed with PTSD, bipolar, and he has a drinking problem. And he picks these big fights with her, and she can't get in a word edgewise. She just basically has to sit there and take the abuse. And he's super manipulative because that's how addicts are. You know, addicts want to play like they're the victim, and their behavior is because they've been slighted, at least in my experience with addicts. And, you know, a lot of the times, the addict doesn't think they have a problem. You know, the addict doesn't admit that what they're doing is destructive. You know, and until an addict realizes that it is a problem, you know, that's what finally is what got me sober, is, you know, sitting in my shop, realizing I wasn't being productive like I was anymore. You know, when I first started using painkillers, I was way more productive work-wise on them. I was way more mellow and talkative and really creative, and there was a net positive in the beginning, but then it became an addiction and I couldn't function without them. So my whole life, sorry, my baby's out here on the patio with me. So my whole life started revolving around, you know, getting high. And I finally was just sitting in my office realizing that this isn't the life that I want to live. You know, I was reflecting on how my life was before. You know, I was reflecting on the people that I was hurting. You know, I was taking money that we needed to pay bills and blowing it on drugs. And my wife didn't deserve it. My kids didn't deserve it. And there was many times in, you know, these blowout arguments, fights my wife and I had, where I told her she should leave. I was no good. You know, I was a problem. And she didn't. You know, I'm very grateful that she didn't. You know, I had a lot of support from my family, you know, my mom and my dad and, you know, relatives, my aunt, my uncles. And not everyone has that kind of support, nor do they have the forethought to realize that their addiction is a problem. And so, like I said in the beginning, there's no right answer of when you should give up on an addict, but you definitely can't just sit around and enable them either. You know, this lady I was talking to, she said she had been with him for 6 years, and he's just manipulative, and you know, you don't really hear this out of women, but you know, he completely cut her off from, you know, intimacy in the bedroom. And I know a lot of people think that's only a man issue, but it's not. You know, it's important in a marriage, it's important in a relationship to both parties, the man and the woman. And she was very open about things that were going on. And you know, at the end of it, she kind of was like, thanks, you know, that's what I needed to hear. And I don't know, she walked away. I don't know, I haven't kept up with her. You know, it's not really my place. I'm not a therapist or a doctor or anything like that. I could just give you my opinion on what, you know, I've been through and what I saw going on when I was using, and how it was affecting my family. And he's trying to steal the show over here. Do you want to tell the people what you think? He was, thankfully this guy wasn't around for it all. I lost my train of thought now. Yeah, so she you know, she's going through it, and I just basically told her, you know, addicts, we're narcissists, we're super manipulative, we're gonna do what we can to get our way. And unless the addict wants to get sober and wants to make the change, you know, I was looking at how like my life was before and how it was getting to a point where I'm like, I'm going to lose my truck. I'm going to lose my dirt bikes. I'm going to lose my wife. I'm going to lose like everything. You know, I'm eventually going to end up on the street homeless. Hold on.
What's wrong, bud? You just need help down?
Sorry about that. He climbed up on the coffee table and couldn't get himself down. He was stressed out. Anyways, no. Yeah, I didn't want to just be, you know, it was hard for me too, you know, because for the longest time I wanted to be a successful, you know, shop owner and run my off-road shop. And I could tell you, living in Southern California, how many... Hold on one sec. You're really killing my video here, pal. And let him inside. Come on, bub. I think he's getting tired, is ready for his morning nap. But, you know, living in Southern California, so many of the off-road shops around there had started and they were booming, and then they closed down because the guy was an addict. I could tell you, you know, there was a lot of other shop owners I was buying pills off of. And I just didn't want to be another, you know, failed off-road shop because the owner was an addict. But getting sober was more important to me, so I closed my shop and got sober. So, like I said, I don't know when it's time. Now I got the dog out here, my God. There's no right or wrong answer. You know, you can't let them ruin your lives. You can't let them run you broke. You can't let them manipulate you. But you also can't, you know, you can't enable it. And at a certain point, you need to, you know, tough love. Kick them to the curb. Tell them you're on your own. Figure it out. I can't be a part of this anymore. And until you're ready to accept that you need help, and until you're ready to, you know, until they're ready to recognize that they have a problem and they need to make big changes, you might have to cut them out of your life. You know, even if it's your kid, even if it's your husband or your wife, you know, sometimes the best thing is a little tough love. And I'm very fortunate that I had the support system that I had, because I wouldn't be here making YouTube videos talking about this story. I wouldn't have a, you know, beautiful home and family life that I have now. And I'm very fortunate. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on when you should give up on an addict. It's hard, I'm sure.